Welcome into the WarChant.com postgame podcast. Ryan Kelly here with you on Saturday night. Our own Ira Schoffel with us on the phone line. And, of course, well, you know the story by now. It's a rough day if you're a Florida State fan because you know you had a chance. And Ira Schoffel joining us over the phone line, the managing editor of WarChant.com. I'd say it was a rough day to be a gambler that may or may not have had a ticket out on Florida State as well.
Yeah, just a crazy game overall. You know, early on it looks like Florida State's probably going to get blown out. It's 14-0. Clemson's got the ball down at the 1-yard line. Looks like they're going to go in 21-0 in the first half, but they fumble. Then it looks like Matthew Thomas is going to recover it and maybe run it back, but he doesn't. Clemson gets it, kicks the field goal, goes up 17-0 at halftime. But the second half, FSU played really well in the third quarter, and for most of the fourth quarter, the defense got stops. The offense made some big plays. Even got a trick play from Jimbo with a little flea flicker to Izzo for a 60-yard touchdown. Then they get the ball back on a fumble recovery at midfield. It looks like FSU's going to pull off the shocker, and then next play, James Blackman throws an interception, and Clemson goes down and scores, and it was kind of a wrap from there. So it's just a crazy game. On the one hand, I think FSU showed that they were, certainly capable of playing with Clemson after spotting them the 17 points. But on the other hand, you still lose by 17. And like you said, it was a game that FSU was FSU was a 16 to 17 point underdog, depending on when you played the game.
Yeah, and here's the thing, Ira. I think there's kind of two lines of thought here, and I don't fault either side for having this line of thought. I think the people who, are just appreciative that Florida State went in, they fought, they were a three-possession dog, they come in, they play hard, they do all that. I get that line of reasoning, and I also get some of the folks who are frustrated because today was one of those days where you kind of saw what could have and maybe should have been at times with Florida State. You saw a team that showed a little bit of creativity on offense, a team that fought hard on defense in a hostile environment, was able to generate some turnovers. And then on the other end, you saw the mistakes. Of course, you mentioned it, the pick right after the fumble. Yeah, you mentioned that first half. They didn't exactly look like they were ready for the moment, looking straight at that fumble when Clemson puts it on the turf. I just feel like what's amazing about this team and this game is that the highs are really high and the lows are really low.
Yeah, and I think, to some degree you could say, that's something that's been kind of emblematic of this team, all season. That they'll play well in stretches and then, have some kind of or head-scratching mistakes. And, I think you saw some more of that today. I mean, they certainly had their opportunities, even against the number 4 team in the country on the road, where, you've got, I think early in the second half, first drive of the second half, I think they get down. They get a 4th and 2 deep inside Clemson territory in the red zone. Call it perfect play. Auden Tate's open. James Blackman just kind of overthrows him a little bit. There's another play where they've got Nooney Murray wide open. Looks like it could go for a touchdown. I think a 3rd and 13. James Blackman overthrows him again. Then you've got some of the defensive plays where they, like you said, Matthew Thomas doesn't scoop up the fumble. And that's kind of really been this team's problem all year is they'll show flashes, and there are times you think, okay, they've turned it around. You think about the Louisville game where they're rallying. It looks like they're going to go in for the win, and they fumble it and let Louisville go straight down the field to score. The NC State game where they let NC State go straight down the field at the end of the game. This was a game where FSU's defense played really well for a long period of time. Kept them in the game, gave them a chance to be in it. But at the end of the day, after Blackman throws the interception, the game's not over there. It's 17-14. Blackman throws the interception. If you get a stop there, there's still, 6-7 minutes left. You can get the ball back. You're still in this. And they let Clemson go, 40-something yards in 6 plays and score a touchdown. So, in some ways it was a nice effort. It was an impressive effort because a lot of people, including me, thought they were going to get blown out. But on the other side, it was a lot more of kind of what we've seen where they just don't make the plays when the game is on the line.
And it's amazing to see this Florida State team compared to the last couple that always seem to play to the level of competition and then pull it out. And I feel like this Florida State team is the exact opposite in that they always play to the level of the competition, and then they find a way to lose the game, or they find that critical mistake, or there's just that key juncture where the defense breaks, or the offense can't make the play. It's just kind of funny to see it in that way, but let's talk about these two units. First of all, you mentioned it. The defense really overcame the storm a little bit early. Clemson puts a couple drives together, but even then, they get a couple key turnovers deep inside their own territory. They're able to keep this game from being a blowout, and honestly, you can say what you want about the final drive of that game where Clemson ends up getting that score, and then, of course, they score again to get that, kind of late push to make that game look a lot further than it actually was. But for the most part, the defense for 3.5 quarters is the only reason you stand a chance in this game.
Yeah, and we talked to Jimbo Fisher about that after the game, and people can go to warchant.com and watch the video of Jimbo's press conference, and he talked about that he thought the defense really fought their tails off, as he said, and really gave them a chance. So there's a lot of positive things. I mean, Brian Burns played an unbelievable game. There were some other really big individual efforts. I mean, I thought, Josh Sweat, the defensive line played really, really well in this game. Again, it just kind of goes all for naught. And I think that, on the one hand, you'd say it's something to build on. On the other hand, you're 9 games into the season now. You've got 3 games left. You got to win them all to get a bowl eligible and end up 6-6 on the season. So it's just a tough game. If this was like the season opener, I think you'd walk away and say, you know what, it was, the top 5 team on the road. It's a chance to, you were right there until the end, and you had a, there's a lot to build on. The problem is this wasn't a season opener. It's 9 games into the season, and time's kind of running out.
You presented a great point to pivot here. You mentioned it's deep in the season, and Mike Martin, of course, the head baseball coach at Florida State, has a great phrase that he usually almost always musters about 2/3 of the way through the season when he says, our freshmen aren't freshmen anymore. They've been in enough games. They've learned the system. They know what's expected of them. They have to go out and take care of business. And I wanted to talk about, when you talk offense today, you can't help but talk about James Blackman. I believe he ends up 13 of 32 on the day. Of course, he makes a couple really nice throws. He makes a couple really terrible decisions. And I think it's so interesting to me because especially going into this season, when the Francois injury happens, you find out that a true freshman's going to be playing quarterback. There's so much talk, and at the time especially, it was certainly true that Jimbo Fisher tends to call good games for young quarterbacks. But today, I feel like the game got better as it went along offensively in terms of play calling and the way they attacked Clemson and the way they set things up. And I'll give Florida State a ton of credit. This is the first time out of halftime that the offense came out and it looked like it adjusted properly to what the defense and what Brent Venables was giving them. They ended up trying to not maybe take as many shots downfield, not as long of developing passes. They made shorter throws, got Blackman his confidence, and then took shots when they needed to. But I feel like Florida State, the way that game was called for a lot of it until towards the end, didn't put James Blackman in a position to succeed. And on the other hand, just so many throws that James Blackman should have made that are open guys that can change the complexion of this game. I think there's fault on the coaching staff, and I think there's fault on Blackman, but I think there's credit to be given to both as well.
Yeah, I think it's they're just, Jimbo Fisher's having a tough time with this situation, having this young quarterback. And, to your point, early in the week when we talked, Dabo Swinney was on the ACC coaches teleconference, and he said, that Blackman's not a freshman anymore. He's played a lot of games. He's shown improvement. And he has, he started 7-8 games now, and you feel like there would be some growth in the decision-making process. But, I think I understand Jimbo's frustration because, there were plays there to be had in the first half, and James didn't make the plays. Now, on the flip side of it, you could say, well, what are you expecting from this guy who, we saw James Blackman miss a lot of those throws against weaker teams at home. So were you really expecting him to come out and hit big passes at Clemson in his first start in an environment like this? But on the flip side, what were you going to do? Clemson was dominating the line of scrimmage. FSU couldn't get the running game going very well. They couldn't protect the passer. It was just, it's one of those situations where I don't know if Jimbo did enough to help him, but there were plays there to be made, and Blackman just didn't do it. And so, I think from that standpoint, it's frustrating for everybody on offense. On the other hand, it kind of is what it is. We haven't seen, and part of the reason I thought FSU would not fare very well in this game, and I picked them to lose more decisively than they did, was because we've seen James Blackman the last few weeks not play with much confidence and really make some poor decisions. And this was a big step up in class in terms of who he was playing against and also where he was playing. So, I'm not shocked he didn't play great. But at the same time, I understand it's got to make it really challenging for a play caller.
The one thing that I do think Florida State did that was a little bit of a problem, I understand in the second half, you're down a couple scores, you're coming out, you need to throw the ball a little bit more. I get that you can't be quite as balanced as you like, but I do feel like sometimes in that second half, Florida State struggled to get Cam Akers in the offense. He's your best offensive playmaker. He needed to be a guy that, in my mind, maybe not just necessarily handoffs, but probably could have used more touches when that game was on the line.
Yeah, I asked Jimbo, why they, basically why they threw the ball so much. I didn't specifically ask him about Cam. I should have. But, he just said that, look, once we got down 3 scores, we felt like we really had to throw the football. And if they're going to throw the football, I think they just feel much better with Jacquez Patrick in there as a pass protector than they do with Cam Akers. But I agree with you. I mean, I think you started to wonder if he was injured because he was not playing so much in the second half. But I kept looking over to the sideline, and I saw him on the sideline with his helmet, and he looked like he was, able to play. And then he ended up going back in later in the game. So whatever the issue was, it couldn't have been a major injury because he went back in the game. But, I just think they got in pass mode, and I think when they get into situations where they feel like they need to throw it, if Jacquez Patrick's available, I think that's who they want in a game just because he's so much better a blocker.
Yeah, maybe. Anyway, Ira, to kind of summarize this thing, week 2, week 3 of the season, as early as that, Florida State, considering their injury fortunes and seeing that Clemson maybe hadn't dropped off the way that some people had expected, this was this thing that I'd say most fans have chalked up for a loss for a long time. But now that it's happened, and especially the way that it happened, I think most fans are still going to kind of walk away thinking, to an extent, this one got away. But on the other end, you knew this was probably going to end in a loss. And with Delaware State, Florida, and ULM still on the horizon, your goal of trying to make a bowl game, keep your winning season streak alive, is all very much still in play. And this game didn't really change that much. It would have helped and shifted it tremendously had you pulled it off. But again, it's not exactly something that I'd say a lot of Garnet and Gold faithful expected when they woke up this morning.
No, I think that's fair, and certainly based on what we've seen up to this point in the season, I think in a lot of ways, again, I think that the second half, FSU, I thought for most of the second half was a better team, and for them to do that on the road when they were down 17-0 is you give them credit for that. You give credit to the coaches and the players for kind of turning it around and gutting it out, giving themselves a chance. But at the end of the day, you're right. I mean, this game doesn't take away any goals for the season in terms of the goals they have left. I mean, they still can get bowl eligible. They've got to win these last 3 games. They've got to beat Delaware State, which they will. Then they've got to win at Florida, which they certainly could if they play the way they did today defensively. I think Florida's offense obviously is not any good, but if they can get some turnovers the way they did today on defense, that's something that's been lacking. That would be a huge benefit to the offense. And then, you ended up with Louisiana Monroe, another game they should win. So, this is a team that still can get bowl eligible, still can post a winning record. If they can do those 2 things after everything that's happened this year, at least you feel like there's something salvaged from this season. That doesn't mean there still doesn't need to be changes. That doesn't mean that they still have to really reflect on how things got to this point. But at least it wouldn't be a total loss.
You can change captains and positions on the ship without hitting the iceberg is, I guess, kind of the way of saying it. And right now, Florida State just trying to stay away from that proverbial iceberg. But, of course, didn't happen today as Florida State takes the loss at Clemson, of course, with Delaware State on the horizon. Ira, I know you and Gene are going to have plenty of stuff over the weekend with warchant.com. I'll be back on Monday with Drew discussing this on Wake Up Warchant. There's plenty more stuff coming with Warchant all over, video, audio, written, so make sure you're staying tuned. Ira, thanks as always for joining us, my friend.
Thanks, Ryan.
And thanks to you guys for listening. Stay tuned. We'll talk to you Monday.